Arkham Asylum game developer Rocksteady has had some recent sexual harassment claims exposed. Games firm Rocksteady accused of inaction over staff harassment. This is from a Guardian article. This news broke in the Guardian on this is from August 18th, Tuesday, August 18th. And this is from Alex Hearn, the UK technology editor there. And it says the byline is exclusive. Signatory of letter to bosses 2 years ago makes it public, alleging sexism continues. More than half of the women employed at the London-based video game developer Rocksteady 2 years ago signed a letter to bosses accusing the studio of failing to prevent sexual harassment and inappropriate behavior in the office, The Guardian can reveal. The letter, dated November 2018 and signed by 10 of the company's 16 female staff at the time, raised complaints about behavior, including slurs regarding the transgendered community and discussing a woman in a derogatory or sexual manner with other colleagues, and sexual harassment in the form of unwanted advances, layering at parts of a woman's body, and inappropriate comments in the office. So that article continues. And this is one of the signatories of the letter who this letter was written in 2018. It's now 2020, of course, so 2 years later. And one of the signatories, has now made it public. And so this is the signatory who has made this public speaking. And she says, she's being quoted here. I have heard everything from groping claims to incidents involving senior staff, all of whom are men, she said. Yet the only thing we had as a result was a company-wide seminar that lasted an hour. Everyone who attended was asked to sign a statement confirming that they'd received the training. It felt that it was just a way for them to cover their arses. She said the letter was kept private in part due to the company's devotion to secrecy, which is not unusual in the video game sector, and in part because staff members feared that if they left on bad terms, they would be denied credit on the company's upcoming game, an adaptation of DC Comics' Suicide Squad.
So this is a pretty interesting one. It's completely standard, unfortunately, right now. For those of you who do not know or just joining us or newer to the video game industry, it is one of the latest industries to be kind of having a bit of a Me Too moment at this time. We're seeing it all over the place, so I'm completely not surprised that this would come up. The more surprising, I guess, and troubling thing is the fact that this is from 2018 and now just kind of making the rounds. I find it very interesting, not so much what happened, because of course, unfortunately, anytime we have power imbalances, anytime we're in a capitalist system where we have that employee-employer relationship, it opens up room there for abuse. But the really interesting thing I find is that it is now coming out now, and the fact that they said that it seems to have persisted, especially that key thing about them only doing one little seminar, hour learning, talking about it. That seems to be a running theme. Anytime we see something happen with a situation like this, anytime we see something happen where there's some type of racial faux pas or issue at a large company, you'll see these kind of things happen. We, at another time, will touch on white fragility and, people raising money on diversity trainings. But the studies show that they don't work a lot of the time. They don't work just like it would seem here. They're going to bring people in. They're going to hold these little seminars so the bigwigs can feel better about it without any real systemic change or any real change enacted. It's what we see as a common theme a lot of the time. And that's not just right now that we're seeing this. Eventually, we do hope to do another video. You'll see we'll talk about Ubisoft has had a ton of allegations come out about them. Same thing at Evo. Evo has been canceled for this year due to all kinds of allegations. The video game industry is really having a moment right now. And one of the reasons that we're seeing that in a continuing theme you'll see throughout this discussion that we have, not just on this, but it'll pop up later on, is due to a lack of a union. Without a union, without protection, these things will continue to persist.
Yeah. I agree with all of that, really. I don't have anything to push back on from you at all. I think that great point on highlighting just that these sensitivity trainings and these 1 hour seminars that they're putting on, this is by and large intended to cover the company's ass. I've been a part of these trainings. I'm a software engineer. I've worked in the tech industry, spent a few years in there now, and I have seen it. It's not just the gaming industry. It's spread all throughout the tech industry and most industries at large. It's just that this has just got its own few unique components to it, but it's really I see it as like a capitalism on steroids in the tech industry, because it's really just high powered, hyper industrialized capitalism is all. And so this idea of like, they come and they do the 1 hour seminar and nothing changes, it is just very familiar to me. And it's something that I've seen in the tech industry where they bring these people in. It's often, gaslighting type of seminars anyways, where you feel you're as a marginalized person, you feel that, and you have the awareness that this is not made to actually, it's not really about dealing with these deep rooted issues or anything like that. They don't want to actually deal with those issues. Oftentimes dealing with those issues means an economic sacrifice for the corporation or company in some way. And they're not going to make that economic sacrifice if when it's damaging to their bottom line. Companies are very willing to use woke rhetoric, but they're very unwilling to make actual substantive change for people, or actually, deal with these issues when they come up. And so when something like racism or sexism and misogyny comes up in the workplace here, homophobia, transgenderism, transphobia. So those kinds of issues come up. They can't, the company doesn't want to deal with them in the meaningful way. They'll use rhetoric and they'll use the language to say, oh, we support these groups and we care about these people. But they won't actually do anything substantive to the people who they have the power over. They're happy to speak out. It's like, a Nike who will use a Colin Kaepernick to come out and say all these things about, racism, or Gillette, did it with the toxic masculinity issue. And they'll come out and they'll release some ad, even though they've been part and parcel of the problem for, decades ahead of that. But they'll also, when you look at how's Nike actually treating the employees who they have power over, well, we see, it's exploitative practices, it's child labor, it's sweatshops, and that's what Nike's known for. But here they'll turn around and they'll use the language of, woke language and woke rhetoric, but not actually back that up with anything substantive. And in fact, they'll do the exact opposite, and they'll suppress this information. They will do everything they can to keep this out of the news. And oftentimes the scary thing is they don't necessarily have to do it explicitly. People are just so afraid. People are so afraid to lose their jobs that it's built into us, where we're afraid to speak out on these issues. You see something happening and that speaking out might mean losing your job, and losing your job in this society could mean destitution potentially for some people. So it is even a privileged position of sorts in a way to be the type of person that is even in a position to be able to speak out, because oftentimes you are just financially, you're not in a place where you can comfortably risk losing your job. And that's what we know the end result of speaking out tends to be, is losing one's job. And so
And it is, like you said, it's definitely a privilege, and that's what I talk about. I like to talk about a lot about weaponizing one's privilege. I have a super dope lady who I will not name, but I will shout out that I worked with at some point in my life, who pointed out to me that she was willing to speak out more often and more comfortably because she was a white woman who was afforded a position of privilege where she had safety nets if they were to put her on the chopping block, and she was going to use that as intended. And that is something that we have to do when we are able to and are able to speak out, because a lot of the time, like you said, people will naturally be silenced by the fact that, like, I could speak out, but then how am I going to feed my family when the other shoe drops? We know anti-retaliation is never real. It's like they say it's always anti-retaliation, but it's not true. You either people still feel the repercussions, and a lot of, like you said, or at best, it gets swept under the rug through a diversity training, which, like you said, for the people who are there, who go through and live it, it's like gaslighting to them. It's pointless. They are forced to go deal with this, and everybody else who could take something away from it usually feels so forced that they walk in tuned out already, because they would rather be somewhere else at that time than in that meeting. So if anything, it'll go away for a week and then it smooths right back out. And that's not to even discuss the aspects of not making of substantial change, where you still have a disproportion where, like, you say all these things, but all of the guys at the top are still straight white males, and it skews their views and perspectives on things, because you don't have those different voices. They aren't represented at the higher level conversations where it'll make a real difference. And at a different place in the article, we don't have to pull it up right now, they even pointed about little things where they had little disconnects where they were so off the same page. They talked about the design on Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn and someone else, and how hypersexualized it was. And some of the women had pointed out, and the dudes were like, wait, what? I didn't even think about this. And, it's just from top to bottom, we would benefit by having more diverse people in the room and in these conversations at all levels of the company. And that, a lot of these problems get solved by, our favorite thing to talk about, democratic workplaces.
Yeah.
That would go a long way of removing these power imbalances that allow people to have their fair say and being able to call these things out without fear.
Yeah, absolutely. How strongly I stand on that. And I think that on the issue of diversity, I think that companies will often preach this idea of diversity and looking for diversity, but what their real goal is diversity within a predefined set of corporate friendly bounds. And so
yes,
they want corporate friendly diversity. They don't want and oftentimes diversity does not include any layer of class into it. And so
yes,
they're totally fine getting, they want a diverse, rainbow, it's rainbow capitalism essentially is what they're looking for, where they want a bunch of people that are this pre-selected set of folks that are going to be favorable to these sort of exploitative capitalistic practices of, like, always trying to, if you are willing to exploit workers, then of course, it doesn't matter what color you are, they will gladly take you, and they will use your identity against you, color, your race, your gender, your
sexuality,
exactly, your sexuality, your anything that they can use, your religion, they will use that to try to show how diverse they are. But if you dare step out of line on anything that harms the bottom line of that company, then you, and let's be real, actual substantive change for people, the type of change that's actually going to substantively change somebody's life, is going to come from more than just rhetoric, and it's going to require more than just rhetoric. And what it often requires is, and you got you mentioned there was the democracy is when we ignore that basic human right and say, okay, well, what do we believe are human rights to people? And if you believe that democracy is a human right, then you should, the same way that, maybe I believe that a dignified job is a human right. As long as we have to work, then we should be able to have dignified jobs with a living wage. I think that's a human right. I think housing is a human right. So I think that these things are human rights. And if you really believe something is an inalienable human right, then it means that why stop democracy at the doorway of the workplace? Why the place where the majority of adults spend the majority of their waking hours? Why are we not allowed to practice democracy there? Democracy being the simple concept of one person, one vote in all major decisions affecting somebody. If something affects me, I should have an equal say in the decision-making process for that. And what that does is that enables people agency over themselves. And until you give people full agency over themselves, you're going, as long as we allow a small set of people, the employer class, to have power over the rest of the other class, the employee class, and that's the two classes of capitalism. That's what makes capitalism is the employer-employee relationship. We have to be clear about that because it's not always defined as such. Some people think that capitalism is free markets and decentralized planning, right? Private free markets, decentralized planning, and some people think that socialism is regulated markets and centralized planning, and that's their idea of capitalism versus socialism, instead of just being, and that's not a good definition of it, as Richard Wolff had recently talked about in a video of his, where he said you have to define these things properly, and a definition has to allow us to differentiate between two things. We define a dog as a dog so that we can differentiate it from all the other animals. We define a chair as a chair so that we can differentiate it from other pieces of furniture. So if we're going to define capitalism as capitalism, so that it should be in a way that we can distinguish it from all the other economic systems. But other economic systems have had free markets, they've had markets, and they've had decentralized planning or private ownership. And so other things have had private ownership and free markets, and those systems aren't. Feudalism had it, slavery had markets, right? You had a market for slaves, you had a market for the things that the slaves produced, like the cotton and other crops, the tobacco and things like that. And so these things aren't, you have to define it properly. So we're talking about whenever you give somebody that employer-employee power, that power as an employer over an employee, that automatically gives them the power to abuse that in some way. They can, that's then power to be abused, where now all of a sudden somebody has the ability to at their whim take away somebody's job. And what that means is that if somebody has that power over you, the marginalized person, are going to have a really difficult time speaking out in a situation where some group of people have this power to just suddenly take that away from you. If you had a democratic workplace that said, no, the only way for somebody to be removed is if we all get together and we all get to hear the information. And because a democracy requires a well-informed citizenry, people have to be provided the information. That's the only way a democracy will function, is if people are provided the information. And that means that there has to be transparency, and people would have to be given the information and be able to make a decision. Now, who do we think should be fired in that situation? If somebody is, reporting valid claims and has evidence, to show that they are being, or a pattern is being established that they are being harassed, then, they should have the agency to, if they have to, have the person threatening them essentially removed from the workplace. One, if they have to, that person, you shouldn't be forced to work with somebody that's, sexually harassing you. We can do things like trainings and things like that, and then, and reintegrate people into workplaces later on. But we would definitely, you would expect that the assurance of safety, at least in your workplace, at the minimum, that basic safety. And so, but you would have that agency in a democratic workplace to one person, one vote on a major decision like that. Somebody going to be, fired? What's the firing process like? How do we do? Yeah.
And on top of that, I just have three quick points to make. One, especially with what you're saying about having that agency over people. We're in the middle of a pandemic. Most people's health insurance is tied to their job. So firing someone is a much bigger thing, and having that fear of speaking out is a much bigger thing when your health insurance goes with your damn job when you speak out.
Yeah.
So that is another very important thing that we need to remember. Also, tying it together about diversity and versus diversity for diversity's sake, and rhetoric and substantive diversity and change. Odd example, and I not to defend these two bozo the clowns, but look at Diamond and Silk. That was the diversity for the conservatives, right?
Yeah.
And now they got shit canned, and they're speaking out that, hey, maybe there's systemic racism going on the right and at over in that area. And you know why? Because that was diversity for diversity's sake. And as soon as they affected or threatened the bottom line, out the door. And that's what happens when you have diversity for diversity's sake. And that's what happens when you allow yourself to be the diversity for diversity's sake. Yes. You may get a seat at the table, but you aren't there for the whole lunch.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I do want to clarify real quick, and we'll definitely touch on this in a later upcoming video, because I feel like it's kind of it's going to need its own segment and point to kind of unpack as well. I believe we dropped the link in the description. Some people have come out who are said to have originally signed the letter and have made a statement defending Rockstar. Rocksteady, sorry, Freudian slip, because we have a crunch conversation coming up later, I guess. But they made a little, they did put out something defending Rocksteady, and we just found that out as we were putting together our info for this video, and we do want to definitely give that conversation the deeper dive it deserves, because it's not as simple as what it is. We do have some thoughts on it, but we will be doing a part 2 video, follow-up video on this to go a little bit deeper in that response as well. We do want it to be out there, though, that a response has been made for that. And we have some thoughts on that we can't dive that deeply into in this video.
Yeah.
But definitely tune in for that.
Yes. And one thing that we did want to dive into in this video was just to, to do our due diligence here and to at least let you hear the statement back that was the response from Rocksteady themselves on this issue. So this was the Rocksteady response that we want to bring to you here.
And this is prior to what I just said. This is a follow-up on that. This is prior to the people who came out defending Rocksteady. This is going to be Rocksteady's response to the immediate reaction when this article first broke.
Yep. Rocksteady acknowledged it had received complaints about sexual discrimination and harassment. From day one at Rocksteady Studios, we set out, and this is a quote, "From day one at Rocksteady Studios, we set out to create a place where people are looked after, a place fundamentally built on respect and inclusion," a spokesperson said. Quote, "In 2018, we received a letter from some of our female employees expressing concerns they had at the time, and we immediately took measures to address the matters that were raised. Over the subsequent 2 years, we have carefully listened to and learned from our employees, working to ensure every person on the team feels supported. In 2020, we are more passionate than ever to continue to develop our inclusive culture, and we are determined to stand up for all of our staff. Last Thursday, after The Guardian contacted Rocksteady for comment, management called an all-staff meeting where they discussed the letter for the first time. New initiatives were promised to prevent further discrimination, The Guardian understands."
So this is, and again, we're gonna dive into that response from some of the people previous. But real quick, it's weird that people are coming out defending it. They're saying that they made changes and all of this stuff. But immediately after that, the Guardian reports that they held an all hands meeting and discussed it for the first time last Thursday. This letter was written back in 2018. So which was it? Did you have the discussion and make the substantial changes back then? Or did you hold an all hands meeting on Thursday to discuss what happened?
Yeah.
Because something's not adding up quite there.
Yeah.
At least not to me.
And I trust the Guardian, and they're going to be careful in their reporting. This is the Guardian; it's a trusted outlet. They're going to be careful in their reporting here. And when they say that when they report it as for the first time, that means that's based on their reporting. So somebody, based on information that they received, they're saying that this is the first time that this letter was addressed within the company. This is the first time that employees within the company have said that it's been addressed. And so this is, just it's so clear that they've based on this reporting, it does not seem like they have taken this issue seriously outside of covering their own asses, as the woman, was quoted, that signatory was quoted as saying earlier. It looks like all they've done is try to cover their ass. And this is what I've certainly come to expect from the tech industry and the gaming industry. And we see it, we know we got to talk about it in gaming in general. It's a very, it's a bro-y ass culture. It's really, it's a misogynistic culture in gaming that
exclusionary boys club. It's a boys club. It's exclusion. I am a diehard, and as you'll know, or those of you who know me, those of you who continue to watch, you'll know I am a diehard video gamer. I'm a diehard gamer. I'm a diehard horror fan. And I will always say that those two cultures are two of the most exclusionary, bigoted boys club of cultures ever. Like ever, ever, ever. Even when you see people try to diversify, when you see game companies try and push for diversity as far as like having Black characters or female characters, the fan base is like dragging them back and being like, nah, we don't want that change. So it's when we tell you this is a long time coming, this reckoning. Like I said, we definitely will do some of the stories on the other places, like the Ubisoft shakeup. Evo is especially troubling. So it's top to bottom. It's not just power imbalances of employers. There's issues around streaming culture. There's issues around partying. There's a whole lot, and it gets even more troubling when you recognize that this is a place that a lot of kids and younger people frequent too. So we have to have these conversations. It's pretty vital that we do, and we'll continue to. So definitely look for a follow-up on this Rocksteady conversation coming soon, on the response of the employees who defended Rocksteady, and look for a separate also video on us talking a little bit more on sexual harassment and other allegations going on in the gaming industry, because this is a bigger topic than just one video.
Yeah, absolutely. This is it deserves, a lot of attention of its own, and we certainly intend to give it that attention and call it out wherever we can. And so please just keep checking back for more on that. All right. So thank you so much to everyone that's here with us. If you haven't already, please do us a big favor and hit that like button. Takes you a half a second there. Just hit that like button. It's somewhere down there somewhere. And so you just press that like button, and also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. You got to subscribe so that you can get, and hit that bell to receive notifications anytime we go live or launch a new video. And that way, you can support the channel through helping us to grow. We also could use your support. We really need support on Patreon. We need in order to keep the show going and growing, we need some funding. And so we We would deeply appreciate your support. Head over to patreon.com/raisedfistmedia. You can see a link down below here, but we will also include the link in the description box. It's not there yet, I believe. I apologize if it's not there yet, but just head on over, type that into your browser, patreon.com/raisedfistmedia, and drop us a few dollars for, just a few dollars a month, or $1 a month, even if that's all you can afford. Whatever you can afford, we really appreciate it. It's the only way to support independent media and allow it to exist is by funding it ourselves. We that's the only way it's going to work, and that we're going to be able to get this type of information out to the places where it matters, and to try to actually break through the sort of mainstream, typical narrow lens that these issues are viewed through. So if you appreciate this analysis and you would like to see more of it, then please do us a huge favor and support on Patreon. That's patreon.com/raisedfistmedia. Thank you so much to everyone for being here. We really appreciate you. Please leave your thoughts in the comments. We love to hear from the community. So please share your thoughts in the comments. We will read those comments and react and engage, and we love to engage with the community. So please, we read every comment. So if you're not here in the live chat, still drop a comment below if you're watching this later, and let us know what you think. We appreciate you being here as well.